because he is edgy. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Cold day, a mix, all this stuff. And I certainly want to say thank you. Had so many phone calls saying, are you okay? Are you okay? Because Carolyn and I tested positive on Monday. And CDC says, 5 days out, wear a mask, and that's what we're doing, but we're fine. If I make you uncomfortable, just let me know, okay? But past that, we've been studying about Max Lucado, Never Alone. And if I do a little bit of review of sessions 1 and 2, God is with you in the ordinary. Even the little things in life he cares about. And then session 2, we talked about what do you do when you're stuck? When you're just absolutely stuck and you don't see any way to get unstuck. God's with you then. And of course, doing the miracles as put forth by John. And then today's lesson, if we look at that, God is with you in the storm. And it talks about the storms of life. And if you think about the storms that you have had in your life, not just lately, but throughout your life, what was the worst storm you were ever in? And if you want to think of a physical storm or an emotional storm, that is up to you. But think about the worst storm that you have ever been in. Where is God when we are in that storm? That's really the basis for the lesson today. Where is God when you are in that storm? Because so often we cry out to God and say, God, why is this happening to me? Where are you? What's going on? Can you at least give me an indication when I'm going to be out of this thing? And yet, as we talk about all of this, the comment I'm going to make right now is that when you're in a storm, it's about as necessary for your life as can be. And we can agree to disagree on that. But I'm telling you, storms are necessary. Why is that? Okay? Let's keep going. Yeah. What do you see in that picture? Absolute destruction. What do you think caused that destruction? Anyone in here ever been in an actual tornado? We sort of don't get those around here, do we? But if you've lived in the Midwest in particular, you know what it's like. Do you even know what the sound is for a tornado coming? But I mean, if you're next to a town, what is that sound that you would hear to go inside? Do you know what it is? Siren. Okay, let's keep going. And what kind of storm do you see here? How many of you ever been in an ice storm? Now that's something that we have here. One of the worst ice storms I ever saw, we were going to visit my daughter Rachel at Ohio Northern University in Ada, Ohio, which is in northern Ohio. And they had one of the worst storms ever recorded in the United States. I mean, it broke down tree after tree after tree. There was not a single power pole still up. They were all down. It was absolutely incredible, the destruction that nature can do. Let's keep going. Yeah, a little bit of background about today's lesson. Sometimes I forget about the background and I don't want to do that. Jesus is fairly early in his ministry here. He's called his disciples and he started doing all these miracles. And so he's got huge, huge crowds following him. He's not in Jerusalem. Really, he worked in sort of two areas. Jerusalem was just one area. That's where he was crucified, and that's where he did some teaching in the temple there. But he's in around the Sea of Galilee. In fact, would you please put up the map, Brenda? Keep going. Yeah, here we go. He's in northern Israel, as we talk about Israel, and around that Sea of Galilee. He did so much of his teaching around there. That's where he was born, in that area. That's where he was raised, in this area. It wasn't in Jerusalem, wasn't anywhere near it. And this is where he called so many of his disciples. But today, if you want to go back to a few slides, Brenda, that would be great. Yeah. But today, he's been teaching. He's been doing miracles. In fact, he just got off the miracle where we start today of feeding the 5,000 men, as recorded in the Bible. So there's going to be even many more than that had been listening and then saw the miracle. They saw the miracle. They were part of the miracle. And then Jesus receives word that his cousin, John the Baptist, had just been beheaded. You see, sometimes we think we're the only ones that go through a storm. Jesus was in a storm at this point in his life, and I'll show you why. I'll show you how that comes about. It's really interesting. So let's go ahead. Yeah, what's the most difficult part for you for being in a storm? Patrick? Rest? So what you're saying is the turmoil of being in it gives you no peace. Forcing myself to be at peace. Anybody else? Chaos. So a person that loves order, the chaos you don't like. In fact, it would probably one of the worst things that can happen to you. Okay? Anyone else? Interesting. For, can we just say fear? Fear. Fear. Absolutely. Fear. So, as we run through all of this, let's go through the scripture, okay? Here it is. We're right in John 6. Immediately preceding this, and I'll show you a couple of verses so that you get a little bit of more background on what's going on with Jesus here. But when evening came, all right, what had he been doing during the daytime? That's when he did the miracle of feeding the 5,000. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, and they got in a boat and started to cross the sea to Capernaum. Now, the Sea of Galilee, I know Pastor Bob has equated it sort of a Crystal Lake, that same sort of thing. It's a lot larger than Crystal Lake. It's the same kind of deep water, oftentimes tumultuous lake, but it's a little bit bigger, okay? And they got in the boat and started to cross the sea to Capernaum. It was already dark. It's saying, why would you do this in the dark? But they did. And Jesus had still not come back to them. So where was Jesus? All right. The sea was getting rough and rising high because a strong wind was blowing. Then, when they had rowed 3 or 4 miles, so they were out. They were into the water. When they had rowed 3 or 4 miles and they were in the center of the sea, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and approaching the boat. And they were, and I think this is an understatement, they were terribly frightened. Can you imagine? Just imagine. What would be your first thought? Let's keep going. But Jesus said to them, and this is why I like it out of the Amplified Version. But Jesus said to them, it is I. It's another term for I am. And if you remember When Jesus says, I am, the things that happen, because when Moses asked who God was, who shall I say you are? Remember how God answered? I am. So Jesus, at more than one time in his ministry, invokes what I call his God card. I am, do not be afraid. Then, and I'd like to say, and only then, were they willing to take him on board to the boat. And immediately the boat reached the shore of the land to where they were going. Okay, so go ahead. So they're going to cross to Capernaum, which means where would they have been? On the southern part. And the Sea of Galilee, again, they're out in the center in a tumultuous storm. And Jesus comes across walking on water. Can you imagine? So where was Jesus? What was going on here? Okay. So what I'd like to do now is let's listen to Max and see what he has to say. All right. Observations? Go ahead. I made a statement earlier. Storms are necessary. You may not think so at the time. I know I don't think so at the time. I don't think I've ever perceived a storm in my life and said, hey, this is going to be great. This is exactly what I need at this point in my life. Quite the opposite. However, to get to the end of any storm, you must first go through the storm. Why is it important to go through a storm? Can't know what it's good until you've been through the bad. Anyone else? Everybody hear that? What a wonderful observation. People don't really want to change unless they have to. The storms in our life cause us to change. I paraphrased. Is that, Chris? Okay. I want to read you something. We marvel at rainbows for a reason. I love rainbows. Carolyn and I love our sunsets. They are just an absolutely gorgeous ending to a day. We chase sunsets. We get to see sunsets over the west here. So we wanted to see a sunset over the east. Let me tell you, we chased a lot of different places to finally get a sunset over the east. You go, wait a minute, what do you mean a sunset? How about a sunrise over the east? Okay. We love watching that sun going down and coming up. What is it about that beauty? Rainbows are a stunning sight in the sky, and they represent the calm that follows a storm. But a rainbow is the last thing we're thinking about in the middle of a storm. We're just trying to get through it or out of it or away from it. During difficult storms in life, it is easy to become so focused on our own problem, whatever is causing the storm, that we miss what's happening in the midst of that storm. We miss the lesson. You go, I'm not there. And so oftentimes we see Christ in the midst of that storm. We see Christ as the ultimate problem solver for that storm. And what's wrong with that? We see Christ as the problem solver for that storm. What's wrong with that? You say, Gary, there's nothing wrong with that. That's how I perceive Christ to be. Take the storm away from me. Solve my problem. Solve it for me. He's not there just to be the problem solving. He does not only show up in the rainbow or the light at the end of the tunnel. He is there to weather the storm right there with us as we are going through it. Why? Because storms strengthen relationships. Jesus isn't going anywhere when one hits. Instead, he's just as near as he ever is. Storms strengthen relationships. You go, what? Let's keep going. All right, here we go. Think about your closest relationship. I'm not going to throw out husband and wife this time, okay? Think about your closest relationship. What is it? What is your closest relationship? And what has made you closer over the years? The good times or the tough times? Notice I didn't say bad times. What has made you closer to that closest relationship that you have? The good times or the tough times? Let's see a raising of the hands. The good times or the tough times? Oh, yeah. It's been the tough times, of course. So I've made this statement before. So let's pray. Oh, Lord, send more tough times. You're never going to pray that. And yet, we get closer during the tough times. I know Carolyn and I have. And the tougher the times, the closer we get. Period. Now, let's think about your relationship with Christ. When do you get closest to your Christ? When do you get closest to your Lord? During good times or during tough times? So now are you sensing a theme or not? Let's keep going. Here it is. Difficult times are necessary in your life. Say, Gary, I don't like death. I don't like all this stuff that's going on around me. Why are they so necessary? Interesting. Let's keep going. I told you, Jesus was in the midst of his own storm. Max referred to that. Not only had his cousin been beheaded, but he had sent word out that he wanted Jesus too. Jesus needed time to grieve his cousin. He didn't get it. Remember? The first time they got in the boat to get away from the crowd that they had just fed, they followed him. They followed him. Here's why, though. Let's take a look. When the people saw the sign attesting miracle that he had done, they began saying, "This is without a doubt the promised prophet who is to come into the world." Then Jesus, knowing that they were going to come and take him by force to make him king, withdrew again to the mountainside by himself. That's why he went away by himself. So you got Herod after him, and he got the people after him. He needed time to grieve. He needed time alone. There was a storm going on around Jesus in his life. And if you continue reading on past these miracles into John 6, you'll see how Jesus dealt with this crowd that wanted to come and make him king. There's beauty in it, there's heartache in it. Because truly, he lost the crowd, I think purposely. He lost the crowd. I mean, he lost them to the point where he had to look at his own disciples and say, do you want to leave me too? And this is where Peter goes, where else do we have to go? Jesus was in his own storm. So we asked the question, what would Jesus do? What did Jesus do? He did two things. Yeah, how did he find comfort? He went by himself and he prayed. But he also did a second thing. Even in the midst of his own storm, he never stopped serving others. Never. When he saw all those people coming, he had compassion on them and he served them. I think when we have the storms in our lives, when they happen, so oftentimes, and rightfully so, we focus on ourselves. Ourselves is the only thing we can think about. And yet, there are still others in need. David's going to talk about gifts today. The purpose of gifts in the body. And we use those gifts, not for ourselves, but for others. Even in the midst of this storm in his life, he never forgot about others. Let's keep going. So how do you find your comfort? What do you do? Sometimes, truly, it's to get angry. You go, well, how is there comfort in anger? Sometimes when you just let it all out, it's like a cleansing. So what do? When you're in a storm and there's no way out for you, what do? When you're fearful, when there's chaos, when there is no peace, and you look at this and go, gosh, what do? Well, that's a question I'd like answered. What do you do? Pray. Patrick. I don't know if you could hear Patrick. He goes, but sometimes it just doesn't work out the way we want it. Without going into too much, I can remember one of the biggest storms ever to hit in my life probably 20 years ago. And the events that took place to make this happen were just bizarre with what I was on track to do and where I was supposed to go. I had it all planned out. I had it all planned out. I was so angry. But in the end, when I could see clearly, because all I had left was God, when I could see clearly, I saw how God took me out of a situation where I was arrogant, where I was self-serving, where I was seeking the absolutely wrong things. And let me tell you, it hurt. It hurt. My point, for me, Most of the times in my life when I've had a storm, it is to humble me, where I've had to say, you know what? I was wrong. I was wrong. And only afterward could I take a look back and say, God, thank you for doing that to me. So, yes. How does that work out? Not my will, but yours, Lord. Let's keep going. This is another storm. Remember this one? This comes out of Mark, and Max referred to it. It's a little bit different, but the same kind of storm. On the same day, when evening had come, he said to them, let's go over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Same type of thing, only he's in the boat with them this time. It's a whole different scenario. So leaving the crowd, they took him with them just as he was in the boat. And other boats were with him. And a fierce windstorm began to blow, and the waves were breaking over the boat, so that it was already being swamped. But Jesus was in the stern, asleep, with his head on the sailor's leather cushion. Keep going. And they woke him and said, teacher, don't you care? We're going to die. And he got up and sternly rebuked the wind. Love the word. Sternly rebuked the wind. And said to the sea, hush, be still, be muzzled. And the wind died down as if it had grown weary. And there was at once a great calm, a perfect peacefulness. And the reason I show this to you, how would you like to have a perfect peacefulness? Can you imagine the worst storm you've ever seen? And then have Jesus come along and say, stop. And have that sense of perfect peacefulness. Jesus said to them, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith and confidence in me? They were filled with great fear and said to each other, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? Who is this Jesus? Who is this Jesus that still cares about me? Let's keep going. Love that statement. Sometimes, myself included, we forget that we see Jesus as the Lamb of God. He's also the Lion of Judah. There will be a time when he uses this I am. Keep going. Then here's the real question, or one of the real questions. Have you ever felt peace in the middle of a storm, knowing that no matter what happened, I have faith enough that this is all going to work out? Tough one. Keep going. What caused it? Ooh. Ooh. Okay. Keep going. Turmoil. We all need it. I go back to Chris's statement. There's no change without turmoil. There is none. Cool. Where'd we get this? Google. Does that cause turmoil? Sure it does. All you have to do is watch the nightly news. You'll have turmoil. You will have turmoil. But I'm here to tell you, in the end, it all works out. It all works out. Here we go. So what was Max's point? Keep going. What's my point? And my point was, do with that however you will, but I'm telling you, you want growth? If you want getting closer, you got to have it. You know, this series, I'm going to highlight David Crowder, just because I just love him. My high school students that were taught, just, you know, the Christians loved him because he's edgy and he's out there. I love the song "In This House." Go ahead, play it.